the best advice I could give anybody, first thing you got to do if you're not cover cropping and you want to get involved in it, you better get a friend that's done it.
Good.
And a peer and somebody that has been through it, because let me tell you what, those first 5 or 6 or 10 years, you're learning a lot. I didn't have very many people to talk to. Now there's a bunch of people to talk to.
Okay, well, I'd like to invite you to an interview with 2 highly successful Central Ohio grain farmers who have utilized cover crops for years in their farming and agribusiness operations. As a member of the Nature Conservancy's farmer advocate for conservation and a cover crop farmer myself, I thought that this brief interview would be helpful to corn and soybean and wheat farmers, showing the benefit and possible drawbacks in building soil, OM, slowing erosion, breaking compaction, and other sustainable practices that can help us in business despite rising land prices, input costs, and development pressure. The 2 farmers I have here they have been mentors to me. And even though I'm older than everybody in this room, I've learned a lot from both. And I'll just go down the names here. Daniel Call, what crops have you grown, and what crops do you grow in the acres you farmed?
So crops,
acres,
crops we grow, primarily corn and soybeans. We do have a lot of alfalfa hay that we raise for the horse market. In Kentucky, also quite a bit of wheat. That's primarily covers most of the acres. Family farms, close to 2,500 acres, and we've been on the same farm since our family arrived. Through some research, Library of Congress, those kind of things, about 1798. So
wow,
we've been there for 226 years, and I'm the 7th generation of the group. So yeah, we've got some history.
Keeping it going. Yeah. And you're up in Madison County, mostly, which is just near here.
Yep. We're between Bloomingburg and London.
Yeah. And Bloomingburg's kind of the central area right here for me and Evan here. And how about your farming background? I know you grew up farming.
Yeah. Sure. Grew up there. Lived there my entire life. So once was heavy farrow to finish, and had a lot of livestock over the years, would be cattle, sheep, and been involved in all of that. But as far as involvement, get as dirty as I can, as often as I can. But love what we do, and really back to the point about cover crops. It does kind of change the dynamic. It creates a lot more management time and effort and needs, and scheduling things. It's a lot more difficult than just kind of going out there planting and harvesting, but the benefits have been absolutely incredible. The way the soil has changed, the farm has changed, the productivity has changed. I mean, it's just been exponential growth. And first cover crops I planted was in 2007, so I guess that's been 17 years going back, and that's changed some with how we do it and what we're doing, but haven't backed off of it, because I see, there's challenges, there's concerns, but the positives and the benefits totally outweigh the negatives, and the additional effort and the additional management it takes to work through all those.
Mm-hmm. And I know you're interested in soil biology, and you've helped me out through that a lot over the years, understanding how this stuff works for your benefit. And you've got another business too, I think, don't you?
Yeah, involved in the seed business, and I've done that for the last 26 years. Yeah. So the neat thing about working with customers and being involved in seed, number one, you kind of get to see what the future and see things coming down the pipeline. And you get a chance, whether that be seed applied technologies, or whether it be traits, or whether it just be products, germplasm, you get a chance to see and kind of evaluate how you think that fits. and how that would benefit your operation. And so far, we've taken advantage of all those opportunities because it has been beneficial for us. The other thing that's really cool is getting to work with hundreds of people every year. And the network's neat because people share their successes. And farmers these days are really, really, really smart. And they're really advanced. And they're also, sometimes people think farmers are pretty tight-lipped, but they're willing to share their mistakes pretty quick, and they're willing to share their successes. And I think when you look at the yield curve, just the general yield curve of corn and soybean production, whether you say nationwide, whether you say in the state of Ohio, whether you say in our local community, and you see how that yield increase has grown and has grown quickly over the last decade and a half. That's from people sharing. I mean, that's from conversations like this and seeing and watching what your neighbor's doing. It's from technology. Yeah, it's from better germplasm. I mean, all those things. And if you don't think this thing is not going to continue to grow, and the speed at which we're going to see these increases and benefits, it's going to move faster in the next 10 years than it has in the last 10 years. Yeah. And the last 10 years have been a blur. And so it is cool to be involved on that side of things, because we do get a chance to see what's coming and the evaluation and knowing, hey, I see how this is going to benefit our customers, how it's going to benefit me, how it's going to benefit our community.
And Evan, you're right at the forefront there, and I would ask you the same things. I'm always asking you this stuff.
Well, I have to agree with Daniel on most of everything he said there.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Evan Schaefer, live about 4 miles north of Bloomingburg, and have not been in this part of the world as long as Daniel has. My grandfather moved up here in 1964, so I'm a third-generation farmer. We grow corn, soybeans, and wheat, and we've been doing cover crops for, Grandpa was doing them a long time ago, ahead of sweet corn, or after sweet corn, rather, because we didn't want to let the ground sit fallow for so long, and then we started planting them ahead of soybeans, and we've had 20 acres that we've tried every kind of cover crop on, I think, known to man. And that's kind of been our plot, and we're for full-scale production. Almost every acre gets it if we can now. So
yeah. Well, you've got another ag business too.
Yeah, we're actually in the custom application business. We sell a little bit of seed and fertilizer also. So my story's not a whole lot different than Daniel's as far as that goes. Just a few less years of actually doing the jobs, but we've terminated a lot of cover crops. And when he talks about challenges, that can be one of the big challenges, especially when we're running rye. You go out there one day and it's 6 inches tall, and the next day you turn around, it's 3 or 4 foot tall. So all it takes is a couple rains to get ahead of you. And if your plan is to plant green and let it get tall, that's okay. But if your plan is to terminate when it's short, that can be a challenge. So staying ahead of that.
Yeah. Now you're going to get more nutrients, and we've heard people say about the phosphorus levels go up and all this stuff if it's higher when you turn it under or actually kill it. But then if you got rain coming, you're a little worried about it. So terminate. But did I ask you how long you said how long you've done cover crops?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Well, what's your current cover crop like you favor right now for your crops?
So really, right now we're using straight rye on everything. We've used rye and rapeseed in the past, but we actually last year started raising our own rye.
Right.
It harvests about the same time as wheat. We manage it just like our wheat, so it was pretty easy to transition into growing our own and just keeping the seed. And then we're just applying that. We've got a Haggie that's set up with an air box, and we broadcast with that right after the beans are cut, right after the corn's shelled.
What's the rate you put on? I know it all depends on.
Yeah, it depends on time of year and what kind of soil moisture you've got. We basically start at 35 pounds and go up to 50. We try not to get too heavy, because if you get too heavy too early in the season, you can have an absolute mess. Unless you're trying to roller crimp, you've got to be heavier, obviously. But we try to terminate when it's about a foot tall.
Yeah.
So that's kind of our range.
Yeah. How about you, Danny? I know you got different mixtures going on besides rye, but
Yeah, obviously the easy one, especially across broad acres, would
For
be
people
cereal
to
rye.
try,
Yeah, for people to try, but across broad acres, it's cereal rye, just because it's so easy to kill and it's so easy to establish. And the planting window for that, I mean, we've sowed rye into the month of December, to where you had to wait for the ground to thaw in the morning before you could go in and put it in the ground. We do not broadcast. We do sow it with an old set of drills, double drills. Got kids that can do that. It's a labor issue, and fortunately we have plenty of labor. So I like the direct seeding. I like getting in the ground. We're at 40 pounds on that. We probably should dial back, and every year I say, I'm going to dial that back. And then when you go in there and we kill it in the spring, I'm comfortable with it and haven't had any issues. But again, as Evan suggested, that you got to be on it and you got to be there for the timing. So when it comes to terminating that, we try to plant first, or if we can see the window of opportunity, we're going to be able to get the beans planted before the next rain, then we'll just go burn it all down. But it's our preference to plant green. Just again, it's in the beginning, you're so focused on what's above ground.
Yeah.
Until you realize that what's below ground is all that matters for my benefit. Now the above ground, we can control holding that back. I mean, there's benefits there, but it really takes an adjustment in how you perceive what you're looking at, and then it takes confidence. It's scary, and you've got to have success.
Yeah.
And once you have success and you say, "Yeah, I can do this. I can make this work," it's not nearly as challenging as what I thought it was. And I've told people before when they said, "Well, how do you plant into that cereal rye?" And I said, "Well, you double crop soybeans before, right?" Well, yeah. It works the same.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no difference. If you can double crop soybeans and standing wheat stubble, you can do this. And this is actually, I would argue, easier.
For sure.
Because the ground's more tender in the month of April. From the other side of it, so we'll do some biosolids after wheat on some of the ground every year. And so then we'll go in and we'll use a mix of just spring oats, radish, and we've used clover, we've used peas in that, and that will just raise tremendous corn. Corn loves to follow oats. It loves to follow oats, and you'll never raise better corn than behind oats. And even if it's just a late summer seeding of spring oats, we've used winter oats in the fall behind soybeans and had mixed results with that because we're about as far north as you can get and get them to overwinter. First 2 years did it. Probably had 2/3 of them make it through the winter. The last year did it, didn't have, but maybe 5% make it through the winter. So that's a challenge.
That's helpful.
But and you know, as you go south, you're okay on that. There would be, I would think you get south of the Ohio River, there would probably be no issues with that. But anytime you can get oats in the mix and plant corn behind them, it makes for a tremendous corn crop.
Now you typically, as I know, plant around the middle of April, right? Not when you like to plant. Most people are. I got to do more of that. I'm the old school, but when we're doing more of that due to weather and climate and everything. But so does your rye get up? Generally, how high is it when you plant it green? Right?
Well, it could be from the boot top up to above the knee.
Okay.
We've fortunately been able to get ahead of any of the stuff, the shoulder high stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, the day it's fit, whenever it's April and it's fit, we're going to plant beans, we're going to plant corn. And honestly, part of that is I want to get in so I get my cover crop killed. But the other thing is slugs have been an issue for us prior to cover crops. That's not a cover crop problem. That is a no-till problem that we've dealt with and having a lot of fodder. And if you get a crop planted early, takes heat units for slugs to hatch, and we can get the crop off and going and get ahead of the slugs. If we go early, if we wait till May, then they're going to find us and they could get us. So planting early helps us get out ahead of that. And we've been, I mean, the whole thing with frost damage on corn and soybeans, the worst frost we've ever had were the ones that were the week before Memorial Day.
Right.
I mean, so we burned off beans, we burned off corn for years, and we can get away with it. And beans are way more resilient than we ever want to give them credit for.
Right.
But so that's the reason why going fast and going early is work for us.
So are you planting corn green also?
No.
Okay.
Very little. We have, but I'm so hyper. Beans, we lose a third of the stand. If something bad were to happen, and we're fine. Not that that's been an issue, but if you've seen places where it goes like that. On corn, we try to stay away from going behind rye. I've planted green in some mixes and came out fine. I had one that was a woolly mess. We planted green in alfalfa.
Okay. Yeah.
We just hadn't terminated yet with corn. We run 15 gallon of 28 ammonium thiazole with the planter that compensates for some of that nitrogen lockup, but it's a rarity more so than a practice. Again, I guess if there were fewer acres to manage, you would probably do more of that on the corn side, but just have stayed a little bit away from that.
Because I like planting beans green. If I can get the beans planted before you get up to knee-high rye. But if it's okay to spray, not okay to plant, and the rye is going to be growing, that's the reason we go out there and kill it so early. But we've had some good success planting beans into.
And I think the other key on that is I talk about a lot of this from the standpoint most of the ground is well tiled.
Well, we're in the same same way.
So we can get away with this. If I had ground, and we do have rye that we plant on some undrained ground, that I do get worried about because the ground's not going to dry out to plant, so we need to burn that off. But the other side of that is it doesn't overwinter nearly as good. You don't have near the stand where you have those heavier soils and wetter soils, and so instead of overcompensating by planting more rye, leave the same amount, and we don't have as good of a stand. I think we're getting things accomplished there as far as root growth and organic matter. But I think it allows us to still plant that and get away with it.
I think the cover crops have shrunk the water holes, though. It pulls out some of the compaction that the standing water has caused.
Yeah.
It doesn't fix it by any stretch, but I think it shrinks some of the, whether it's drinking it faster or what it's doing. But I think some of our water holes have, shrunk in size since we've started.
I think we're getting the water down as much as
probably.
And then also we're carrying the load of equipment. You're having support with soil structure, carrying the load versus that place that's just a muddy spot, and every time you go through it, you squash it out, and you've never let it heal itself. And I think part of the process is you go through that healing process.
Good point. So another advantage of cover crops is the breaking up the compaction a wee bit and everything. But what's your rotation, Evan? Did I already ask you that? Or
So we're corn and soybeans alternate every other year, and then wheat gets thrown in about every 5 years.
Okay.
Into that.
Wheat. So
That's about where it falls in the rotation.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we run rye after both crops. Pretty much the same practice on both of them. We'll spray them or terminate them whenever we can in the spring. What's going to corn, we try to terminate earlier than what we do to beans, because like I said, we will plant beans green up to, I would say, knee high is about our max on starting to get nervous and the stalk starting to get, or the stem getting joints and harder to kill, harder to get down. And
how'd you figure on that 5-year straw or wheat rotation? Like, did you say every 5 years or 3 years? Or
5 years is just kind of how it works out with our acres.
Oh, okay. So you've got a system going where
we plant 300 to 400 acres of wheat every year. So it just kind of rotates through the fields.
Okay. Right. How about tillage practices? You guys have some tillage, or I forget. Daniel, what do you have?
I'll let Evan go first. You're sitting in front of him.
Well, so we've been no-till for quite a while. And last fall, we were having some compaction issues. We had some cool wet springs that we were having trouble getting on the ground fast enough. So we went to strip till last fall. And this spring, I think we had the best stand, most even stand of corn we've ever had. So we are going to continue down the strip till path, planting cover crops. I was talking to you guys earlier that we're going to let them get up just past germinated and then go through there and try to strip it. We'll have good clean strips to plant the corn into, but we'll have good covers to hold the soil in between those strips. And last spring I was digging where we actually did that practice, and that strip was just full of rye roots. It was awesome. And you still had that dark ground to plant into, warmed up 2 or 3 days sooner than our no-till ground. So really going to like that. And then we're also going to band fertilizer with the strip till bar to reduce fertilizer rates and also get it subsurface rather than laying it all on top. We'd been using chicken manure and leaving it on top with the cover crops because we were no-till. But this way we're going to be able to get it down deeper and hopefully reduce some of the runoff and loss.
Yeah. Nature conservancy like that. Daniel, how about this?
Yeah, so we're strictly no-till. On corn, beans, wheat, alfalfa, everything gets no-till, and have been that way since far back as I can remember. It seemed like we did build my uncle built our first no-till bean planter really before there was anything good. That was in '86. Wow. But there was some no-till, and especially no-till corn in the late '70s, as early as that. So have, outside of some tile lines that have got to be worked down, that's the only tillage we've done really for the last pretty much 40 years, I guess you would say. And we've watched organic matter grow incredibly well. There's no doubt in my mind, I would say that as a no-tiller, and yields are phenomenal. There's no doubt in my mind, the strip till is without question. I mean, you can look at the statistics, you look at the yield data. As a whole, strip till out yields anything. I mean, I don't know why you would own a piece of tillage equipment. This is the only thing you would need. But in my mind, I see where I see the future going is with short corn. Short corn's coming, and it's going to be here for eternity. And that's that. So our whole world's going to change. And in that case, we're going to be 20-inch corn. We're going to be 15-inch corn. We're going to be 12-inch corn. I don't know where it's going to end. Ideally, we probably try to get 12-row corn and plant a seed every 12 inches, and you have 43,560 seeds per acre. In my mind, that's where I'd like to see us go, and you can't do that with strip till. And so instead of making this investment, I think the next step for us is to invest in a narrow planter with all the technology on it and go that way, knowing I can't do this. But the other side of it is then I envision, we can put fertilizer on with the planter and run a coulter or some sort of a unit. It could be ammonia, it could be whatever. In between, and I'm only 10-inch off center. Yeah. And then I've got everything laying there. So in my mind, that's kind of the direction I see the world headed. And how fast the short corn gets here, everybody's thinking, 27, 28. It's not going to be here by that. On a broad scale. Yes, we can see it in the field, and I can take you and show you some now. But in the next 10 years, that's how it'll look. So that's why I think kind of on the sidelines on the strip till and just wait and kind of go a different direction here.
Well, the way you describe it's sort of the same kind of operation where you clean up your rows and things and so forth.
Yeah, you would still want a row cleaner in there if you were no-tilling, and so how that looks in 20-inch rows. Yeah. But that whole thing's changed, with row cleaners now with air cylinders, and you can change your aggressiveness, and now we've got the ability to, all that can be automatically adjusted in the field, and just the opportunity to add technology on a planter is never going to end.
Yeah.
You have to stop at some point in time because you cannot mentally keep up with. There's only so much you can watch and keep track of, and then when there's an issue on the planter,
right,
you can only stop for so long and deal with it without losing your patience.
Yeah, and your wallet's got to be able to keep it.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
I had never heard anybody talk about 1 square foot per plant.
I think that's where we go. And then they've got multi-directional heads now.
Yep.
I know for silage, but why can't that work? Short statured corn, why can't we use a multi-directional head and pull it through the combine, or have something in between the head and the feeder house that separate ears from fodder, and it'll happen. It'll happen. We're going to get them really close and tight.
Let's talk a wee bit about ROI, short term, long term.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel, what makes you think that this works both ways?
Okay, so if someone's looking for short-term ROI, cover crops would not be the fastest return on investment that they could spend out of their wallet. It's not going to be this huge return on investment, whereas banding fertilizer with a strip till machine, putting additional technology on the corn planter, those kind of things probably have a more immediate and quicker payoff. The short-term ones are additional weed control benefits from cover crops. Basically choking out weeds. We can have nitrogen with some of the legumes. Those are immediate ones that come to mind. But in this economy, do they pay the bills? Probably not, but there are benefits to it. But long term, it's been incredible. And I went back just by chance. I had looked at 2 soil tests. And this was just a handful of years ago, but one was from 2002 and the same field from 2019. So, 2007 when I started dabbling in cover crops. So the change in organic matter in that one particular field, and the average organic matter of that field in 02 was 2.6. My lowest grid, and they were 1 acre grids, my lowest grid in 2019 was 2.6. The highest grid was 5.4, and the average was 4.5. So that's a 1.9% increase in organic matter in 17 years. Now, that's not an immediate ROI. It's not. That's a long-term look. But I can tell you what, the yield has increased tremendously, the water holding capacity. Now, when we're in a drought like this and it hasn't rained, it really has not rained the entire summer. So no one wins at that. But I can tell you, when you go through those dry periods in a normal year, I can hold on for an extra week before the crop really starts to show stress, and that's where the payoff has been. So long term is easy. I heard a guy say one time, I'll never forget it. He said, cover crops are an expense if you're renting the farm. They're an investment if you own the farm. And you know what? I think that tells you everything. I don't think you could quantify it any better than that as far as what that return on investment is. So it's got to be a long-term perspective. There's some short-term things that hit, but it's more long-term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think erosion with the heavier rains and stuff, you can kind of see.
That's immediate.
Yep. Helping out. But what do you think, Evan?
I concur. We've done kind of the same thing, like I talked about that 20-acre field that we've played with, after wheat, and had all kinds of legumes, and that stuff's been 12 foot tall at times with some of the stuff that's been in there. And we've raised that field, I know 2%. I'm not sure what year we tested it in, but I know that there was a 2% difference between the soil tests. And what's 2% of organic matter worth? You're talking a couple $1,000 probably per acre in nitrogen release, sulfur release, water holding capacity, and the productivity of those fields is increased by so much that it's just phenomenal. But in a year by year basis, it is a line item that is a cost. Mm-hmm. It's a long-term investment that if you either know you're going to rent that farm for a long time or you own that farm, I would say even over a 3-year period, it's probably something that's going to pay back, just because you're cycling nutrients, you're keeping armor on the soil, that you are reducing your weed pressure, and you're increasing your water holding capacity. One thing that I notice as a custom applicator is guys that are real ground pounders that are working the ground 2 or 3 times versus us or even you that have used cover crops for a while. or even no-till, our weed pressures are totally different. They're going to have more weeds, and the types of weeds that they have are so much different. And that's just something I've noticed in the past couple of years, and I don't have any data to go behind why their weed pressure is so different. But that has showed up really prevalently the past couple of years. So long term, we're definitely not going to stop, because it's something that I've told Dad, I hope my kids can farm this. I hope their kids can farm it. And I think these guys that are just ground pounding and not worried about the sustainability of their farm are going to have a hard time doing that 100 years from now. Where you've said you've been here for 200 and some years. Obviously, your farm or your family's been a good steward of that farm and taking care of it through no-till, now cover crops. That's something that I want to pass on and try to take care of the land as best we can.
And Jeff, they told us you couldn't increase organic matter.
Right.
And that's
Remember that?
Right.
Remember they said, I mean, in the
I remember that in the 70s, and they said, you lose, if you lose 1% organic matter, it'd take you 100 years to bring it back.
Yeah, and that is proven to be false, and then it's not just that; it's the biology of the soil. It's so much more. I mean, we walk out in these cornfields that have been no-tilled for a long time and have had cover crops, and there was soybean stubble when we no-tilled them this spring, and there is no stubble to be found. I mean, it's digested completely. Now you walk through it after rain, and the dirt won't stick to your feet. The structure is there, but which is a negative thing from the standpoint that we have bare dirt out there. Out of that corn, we actually need to. That's why we need a cover crop in there to keep that covered and keep that progressing. But the fact of the matter is and that was an epiphany. I didn't know what I was going to see, and I don't know why I pulled out one from 02 and one from 19. But the first time you look at that and you see them side by side, and you're going, oh my gosh, look at that. That is in. But then you start looking at the other fields. Well, they all did that. It wasn't just one. It was across the board.
That's a pretty good testimonial.
I think one thing we've missed in the ROI conversation, right, wrong, indifferent, however you feel about it, is the carbon markets that are coming down the line. I know NRCS has started paying for some cover crops through EQIP or different programs. We've got God knows how many companies that are out there slinging carbon credits now. Whether you would agree with it or not, I think that there's some real dollars out there that are going to come to the people that can transition from, full tillage to cover crops and no-till and these different sustainable practices. I also believe that if you're doing cover crops or no-till for the reason that you can get a check because of it, you will fail miserably. We started doing it for erosion control and trying to suppress some weeds. And I think that's the reason that we've had some success, is because we've had a targeted focus to do those things. Where if you're trying to do it for a check and you sling some seed out there, you're going to have problems. But I think that as far as an ROI conversation and with the farm economy we're in now, I think those are some serious dollars that could be found if you're in the right areas, the right mindset, talking to the right people.
And if you know how to do it, like you know how to convert cover crops into carbon, like you're kind of onto it. So. That's a whole nother conversation about we don't know
how all that works.
We don't know what the template is, but can you tell me real quick? You had a great story, and this has been a couple years ago, on water ponding that I believe the neighbors were having trouble with, and you, in your thick cover crop areas, just saw a vast difference in. Go ahead.
I know
it's a great story.
Well, and I know
have more than those, but
but it's the same soil types. There's a fence row that no longer exists between us and a neighbor, and so the soils are the same, right? A lot of times you hear people say, well, if you have a good crop or an attractive looking crop, and how many times you hear, well, anybody can farm that ground. Those guys have the best ground. Well, no, it's the same ground as what's next door. I mean, the glaciers and God didn't decide that, inside that fence row, it's going to be better than outside that fence row, right? Yeah. And so it was a water issue, and neither side was drained. Neither side of the fence was drained, but through cover crops and whatnot, I could, after a big rain, I had next to no water laying, and there was a lake across the road. But one particular story, I think you're sharing, I was coming up the side road back here, and that was, I don't know, 10 years ago or more, and it was a spring storm. Mm-hmm. And it rained half to 3/4 of an inch in 10 minutes. Mm. And I drove through it and come out the other side, and I'm driving up the road, and there's water laying here in this farm, and still water running across the farm. And the next farm there was no water, and then the next one you got to, there's water laying over here, there's water laying over here, and you see this field and there's no water. Yeah. Well, everybody had the same rain event, so what's different? Right. And as I got to home, and you saw where water was laying at the neighbors, and we didn't have any, again, had the same rain. Everybody, and I mean, we're 5 to 10 minutes after the rain event. Mm-hmm. So there's no time in between. And I stopped and I got my uncle, and I said, get in the truck. Mm. I said, you got to see this, and drive around and see it. And it's a real epiphany. You're like, okay, the same rain hit every one of these places, and the people who were taking care of it got the water to go down. Yeah. And it doesn't matter, I understand contour has an effect on that, right? But when you can see the individual fields that different guys are farming and how they behave in that situation, and you see it sinks in. You're like, oh my gosh, this is real.
All this ponding going
right,
on, and yours isn't.
And it's not. And so, why isn't that healthier for everybody? I mean, the whole community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Watch your waterways too.
Yeah,
isn't that wild?
Yeah.
You go from conventional to where there's cover crops, and we share open ditches with some guys, and it's just unbelievable how much topsoil is lost. But then you see yours coming off, and there might be a little bit of something in there if it's a really hard rain, but most of that is held, and it's just...
I've seen it, and I've seen it where there are adjacent waterways coming off of different farms where there's very little water coming off one side, and 200 yards away there's another waterway that comes off of a place that's been beaten up, and it's just running full out of the waterway across the field, and the water is just rushing across like rapids. So that is. And again, so many times we don't even pay attention to those kind of things, and then when you see them, you're like, oh my gosh, this is incredible.
A year like this, an inch of rain that you could have kept in the field in the spring was worth so much right now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, if we could have kept it into August.
And here we are putting tile in the field to try to get rid of it, but we,
This doesn't happen that much, you youngsters. The last one I remember was 99, so hopefully no. I would just maybe finish up with this tremendous discussion for my benefit. I think a lot of people would. Do you guys how does your cover crops affect the rest of your operation? Like maybe timing of things, or planting earlier, or planting earlier variety crops, or corn and beans, or how does it fit into your overall corn, soybean, wheat, alfalfa?
So we haven't changed maybe the maturities that we're planting. Mm-hmm. We're trying to make cover crops fit into the current cultural practices we had, right? Mm-hmm. So maturities we haven't changed. I get the reason why, and I think there's some benefit there. I also think I'm a firm believer that the earlier maturity products, I don't care where you're at, the yield potential is much greater when you get away from what people once thought, you had to have a 112 or 115 day hybrid. Mm-hmm. And I'm not just talking here. I mean, that's where everybody used to think the yield was. Yeah. No, we can go to 100 day. We can go early, and on soybeans you can go early. So the yield potential is there. We just never changed the practice too much. I think the biggest stressor is, and again, labor is not an issue because we've got a big family and a lot of kids. So we can turn them loose and we can go and keep up, and it doesn't interfere in the fall with seeding. It doesn't interfere with the harvesting. Mm-hmm. In the spring, cereal rye in the field, we can plant earlier because it will dry things up a little bit. And the other thing is there's two other benefits that we don't really talk about. But you can see that green, and someone driving down the road sees that green cover crop and says, oh my gosh, how in the world would you manage that? That looks terrible. How can you plant into it? And then the ground is so tilthy, when you hit it with the planter, everything just falls together. And you just go down, you can just take your hand and rake it through the ground, and you can rake just with your hand in no-till ground 3 inches down, 4 inches down.
Noticed that.
Everything is so loose and it almost feels like cheating, and you can get it together. The other thing about having a cover crop out there, even if you've killed it earlier, those pounding rains will not crust the ground.
Yeah, good point.
You've broken the fall of the raindrop to an extent, but also that ground's tilty enough that we have eliminated. I'm not saying it can't happen, because it can.
Right.
But you can take a real pounding rain in the spring and still get away with it, and you almost feel like you're cheating to an extent on
That's a
that.
good point. 'Cause I still keep my hoe, but it's you don't really need it with cover crops.
Yeah. Yeah.
So labor's a little bit bigger problem with us in the fall. So that's the reason we're broadcasting, because we can do it so much faster, because we don't have the planning ability in the fall to get that
That's why
done.
we're hiring you guys to do ours too.
Because I mean, with the Haggy, we can do it 120 feet. We can do it. We can do it fast. And we got a guy that's running a cart. He's chasing the combine from the day before we can start cutting beans. So it's we have multi-talented people, I guess you would say.
Yeah, you do.
In the spring, it's not as big of an issue if we're in a normal spring. Like this year, we didn't have any trouble at all getting cover crops killed. We had a great spring. We planted a lot of beans green, rock and roll first, second week of April. And then you worry about getting her killed once it gets the growth you want and move on. So I guess we're kind of in the same situation as you, except for in the labor. We've seen a lot of, like you said, you could take that soil and just pick it up in your hand, where you go over to something that's, I guess, no-till but doesn't have the cover crops. It's going to have that crust on top because it didn't have any protection. Or where you've worked the ground and it's been beat down and didn't have that protection, you're still going to get a crust on top of it. But we alluded to it earlier, the root mass underneath is so much bigger than what's above the ground, that it's doing all your work for you. The microbes that are living, around that root, giving out the soil glues and actually aggregating things together, the soil works so much better. Like you said, you can close so much easier. We don't have the problems with crusting that we did before we started using cover crops. It's really been a great thing.
Yeah.
Overall.
Yeah. I had a thought, but it left me. So anyway, can we, Stephanie wanted us to do one little short thing about how because she's wanting to get a grant, and she wants to know how we use pure information and where we get our info from and how we network with each other, I think, to learn how things are going on in the cover crop world, I guess, maybe.
So I guess the best advice I could give anybody, first thing you got to do if you are not cover cropping and you want to get involved in it, you better get a friend that's done it.
Good advice.
And a peer and somebody that it doesn't matter what color their equipment is, it doesn't matter, that has been through it, because let me tell you what, those first 5 or 6 or 10 years, you're learning a lot. And I didn't have very many people to talk to. Now there's a bunch of people to talk to.
Right.
So that's the first thing you need is a friend and a peer. But so in that, No-Till Farmer was a good one. They have a good library of periodicals. But as Evan talked about going to the Strip Till Conference, No-Till Conference, you'll learn more in 3 days than you could figure out in a year. And you're going to meet a bunch of people, and you save phone numbers. And next thing you know, you get a phone call, and it's May the 5th, and someone says, "Hey, man, this is what I'm seeing right now. I'm scared to death. What's going on? Or what do you think about this?" And
That's what I called him about this.
so building that network, I think, is the best thing, and then having those resources. But back to what Evan said, going to the conferences is that's the can't miss. I used to read a lot of and I love those short articles, the 2-3 page articles where they condense and compress it down to the important things. I've got a lot out of that. Unfortunately, universities are weak they've done a lot of studies on it. But I mean, a university won't. First off, it's got to be a 3-year test, and they've got to have a definitive. Yes, there is no doubt this is better, or they're not going to stand on either side of it. Where a farmer network can really communicate quickly with what they're seeing. And it's just little things like, once we had a cornfield, all the same hybrid across it, and we were going across this field, and all of a sudden, we jumped 28 bushel. It was between 25 and 30 bushel. And I was in the truck, and my uncle goes, did we change a hybrid variety? This is a lot better. I said, no, it's the same all the way across. And about 20 minutes later, it dawned on me, that's where we ran out of cereal rye the fall before. So 24 months previous, we planted rye that we ran out, and we just quit. And the point that we had ran out, so we saw back to short-term return on investment, long-term return on investment. So this was 24 months later, and it was between a 25 and 30 bushel jump to the spot where it was. And again, if now me sharing that with people and saying, hey, this is what we saw, but a university isn't going to say, they didn't replicate it.
Yeah.
They didn't do it over 3 years. It wasn't at 5 locations, those kind of things. So we can speed things up, I think, as a community offline and talking about it. But we've got to have the resources, because there's some people that don't want to ask.
Yeah. And I think that's what the Nature Conservancy is trying to do with the farmer advocate programs. All these guys, I've met 6 of them this winter, and they don't have all the answers, but they're really willing to share, and you pick up so much stuff. But what do you think, Evan?
Well, I think the biggest thing is you have to have an open mind.
Yeah.
There's so many different ways of doing it, and I would argue that none of them are right or wrong. They've just been used in a right or wrong scenario for what you've actually done. Mm-hmm. So you having an open mind, and hopefully who you're talking to, like you said, you have to have friends in the space that are either doing it or have done it, something of that nature. But keeping an open mind, you can learn a lot more. Going to conferences, even YouTube, Facebook. I'm in God knows how many Facebook groups for cover crop, strip till, all of these different things, because those people don't look at you cross-eyed and think you're nuts for trying to do these things. And the success stories that you read in there, and the success stories that we've had, you tell these to some guys, they just look at you like you're nuts and it was a fluke. But when we can replicate those things, there's so much to be learned. Like I picked up something at the strip till conference. I was listening to Dave Hula talk, and he says his favorite thing is he carries a soil probe in his combine. I was like, what? And he said, every time I go through a spot that does so much better than everything else, I jump out and pull a soil sample so I can find out why. I'll test everything in that soil and actually figure out why was this, square better than the square next to it. There has to be something different, whether it was biologically, chemically through all the fertility. Obviously, in this microclimate, it didn't get more rain. So what actually happened there? Just little things like that we can test on farm and share with others. We can't be afraid to share either. We have a story to tell. We need to tell it to our friends and peers, and they may have a similar story or a solution for your problem. So I think sharing and being open-minded is really where you can get it.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be anything formal. 3 guys sitting together having a beer. That's where you learn everything.
Oh yeah.
It's not sitting around a conference table and trying to be, politically correct and saying all the right things. It's when you can be open and honest is where the learning happens.
Yeah, because there's so much different types of equipment, and we had trouble with our Kinsey planter just rolling up rye, and other people said, no, we've never had that problem, but we did get a guy out there with a Kinsey planter, and it rolled up on him. So, but it would have saved us, because we had to wait a couple hours before we could plant again, because we're cutting this stuff out with a pocket knife. And so we actually had to, and with the rain coming, you might lose some yields if you don't get this final stuff figured out to some degree. You can take a hit, but you need to talk to people who have seen this happen before, so you don't have to go through it. So yeah, but that's all I got. I really appreciate this. So, these guys, ain't they good?